Will any Terps hit the portal?
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, video content creator for 247 Sports and InsideMarylandSports.com, and host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. The transfer portal. No Maryland players have entered the portal yet since the spring football game and since this kind of spring football segment. And I'm kind of surprised. Should anybody enter the portal? Will I be surprised if anybody enters the portal? I want to talk about these kind of conversations about the football transfer portal because I think eventually guys are going to start to hit the portal for Maryland football. I'm looking at it and I'm just thinking about kind of how these different things go down in all these position groups and how this new age in the portal goes. And there's no shot that nobody will be entering the portal. I'm just waiting for the tip of the iceberg for Coach Loxley to make a decision that maybe we don't know about or we don't hear about, but it definitely affects the portal. And it starts with the quarterback competition. MJ Morris is our guy. I'm pretty certain when saying that. I'm almost 100% certain. And if I'm wrong, then call me out. But I'm almost certain to everybody that watches this that MJ Morris is going to be the guy for Maryland football. All the signs kind of point to it for me. Billy Edwards isn't our guy, and Cameron Edge doesn't seem like he's in the conversation very much anymore, even though I thought more of it in my head. If I was a coach, it would have been more of a conversation between Edge and MJ Morris, but I guess it's between Edwards and MJ Morris, and I just don't think that anybody else is as good or as talented and has the ceiling of what MJ Morris can do in that quarterback room, and that's okay. And I think MJ Morris is a good option to start at quarterback, the kid from NC State. And he's made some starts, and there's a reason that schools wanted him, and there's a reason that we wanted him. And I think he's going to be a good player for Maryland football. But what does that mean for the other two quarterbacks or even some other guys in that room? You think about Champ Long as well. Got some reps in the spring game, and I thought he looked pretty solid when he played in the spring game for Maryland football. What does that mean for those guys? I think that in my head, I'm thinking that they both could transfer. I don't think that's a crazy possibility. I don't want to say that's likely, but I think there's definitely a shot of that happening, that both Billy Edwards and Cameron Edge transfer. If one transfers, it's not going to be the end of the world because it's like we were bound to lose one in this situation. Anytime it seems nowadays you have a quarterback competition in college football, you're going to lose one of the guys or two of the guys or three of the guys. Like, that's just the way it is because guys can go somewhere else and play, and that's okay, I think. But I'm thinking that if we lose one, even though that's not ideal, and I'm not saying that's what I want, but if we lose one of those guys, I think I will be okay with it because I would love to have a backup quarterback because you don't know what can happen in today's game. We saw Talia get injured a couple times at Maryland. Billy Edwards had to make a couple of starts for Maryland football. And so I'm looking at it that way. And MJ Morris, I think, has less kind of injuries. He's definitely, we're not as concerned about MJ Morris's injury, less injury concern for sure than Talia had, but still, I do think that you definitely want a backup quarterback that can play, and so I hope that one of them stays, and I think Cameron Edge would be more likely to stay than hit the portal because of he's still young technically, and he just has more time than Billy Edwards, but I do think that it's a possibility that they both enter the transfer portal. Billy Edwards could be tired and said, I'm tired of waiting around. I'm tired of competing. This program doesn't have trust in me, and I want to play somewhere that'd be fair for him to say that. I mean, we brought in another guy when he was supposed to be the starter, basically, so he wouldn't have to be the starter. You could look at it that way. And so I'm looking at Billy Edwards, and I'm looking at it and I'm saying, it could make sense for him to transfer, and that's just the way it is. And it could make sense for Cameron Edge to transfer. And for some reason, if Billy Edwards is a starter, it could make sense for MJ Morris to hit the portal again. But MJ Morris, I'm almost certain, is the guy. But that's just specifically at the quarterback spot. In some other different rooms, there's definitely chances for guys to transfer. I think about some of the younger DBs on our team. Some of those, like, I don't want to say younger now. I guess they're more of like intermediate, some of those junior, sophomore type of guys. Because I'm looking at this year and I'm thinking that Maryland is definitely starting. I'm thinking Perry Fisher definitely is starting at one of the quarterback spots for Maryland. And so I think that he's going to solidify one of those quarterback spots down. And if you're a guy that wants to play and you're looking at it, Perry Fisher has taken one. And then Jalen Husky, the talented corner from Bowling Green, took the other. I wouldn't be surprised if some Maryland secondary guys enter the transfer portal after losing that battle, even though it seemed wide open at first and it seemed like different guys were going to be able to have a shot at winning that spot. And that's kind of why you stay and don't transfer before the spring football. You want to see if you can win the spot because you probably want to stay there if you can. But now it looks like the fact that Jalen Husky and Perry Fisher look to be our starters on the outside, and that could still be wrong. That could definitely switch up, but you might want to leave because of the strength of the younger guys that we're bringing in. We're bringing in some younger guys that are really good players down below. So if you're a guy that wants to play in that cornerback room, you might not have time to stay and kind of figure it out. I think a guy like Leonel Whitaker, a junior now, who got some time as a freshman, who I thought was going to be a really good player, but he doesn't seem to have figured it out. And we had another couple cornerbacks that already left before the season. And so I'm looking at that room and I'm saying I could definitely see somebody leaving from that room. And then I also think about the receiver room, which we're going to talk about more in the second segment, but there hasn't been a guy that has emerged as wide receiver 3, and we really need that. But I could definitely see one of these guys entering the portal because there's just too many good players in that room. I think Braden Wissolowski is going to be looking to play as a sophomore and as a playmaker. I think about Shalik Knotts is going to be looking to play. Octavian Smith is going to be looking to play. Shalik and Octavian, those guys are supposed to be next up for us, and those guys are both juniors. And so eventually you got to go somewhere else. And I think about Robert Smith. He's waited his time. He's been a really good culture piece for Maryland football, but does he want to sit around and continue to wait? I don't know. And so I could definitely see one of those guys entering the portal for Maryland football overall. I think it just comes down to really the quarterback spot, the receiver spot, some of the secondary guys overall. And then, of course, you always got to worry about just anybody on the team. Literally anybody can enter the portal at any moment, and that's just the way it is for anybody and for any college football team in today's game. But I think you really got to think about the quarterback transfer portal for Maryland football and what that kind of means. And I think you got to think about potentially maybe looking to add a backup quarterback in the portal because I feel like you're almost guaranteed to lose one of these guys. And so it's interesting that nobody has transferred yet, but I do think that there's a potential that different guys leave. But I also think you got to be able to replace those guys with the guys that I'm looking at. And I'm thinking the positions that we want to add, I talked about tight end. I want to add another cornerback. Those are really the two position groups and of course, offensive line always can help too. And those are kind of the three position groups that I want to add to. And so I think about if you're losing some guys in that room, that opens up spots to be able to add guys and say, look here, you can replace this guy and you can come in and get some time. And I think that's a fair assessment of it. And so I'm looking at the portal and I'm thinking we have potential to definitely add some guys in those positions, but I also think we could lose some guys in some of those positions that we currently are pretty good at or pretty solid at right now, but maybe it could turn into a need. And that's what I'm talking about with a backup quarterback. And backup quarterback is definitely important. I know you might not think about it as super important because the guy hopefully more than likely will not see the field. He has a probably pretty good chance of seeing the field at some point during the season, not just because of blowouts, but just in general. Like, usually your guy gets nicked up for a play or two at least during the entire season, and you'll be lucky enough if your guy doesn't miss a game the entire season. So I think that's important as well to kind of think about for Maryland football. But I do think the portal could start to hit, and I think guys could start to leave and find new programs. I'm thinking about especially in that receiver room, especially in that cornerback room, and of course in the quarterback room. Those are kind of the three position groups that I see people leaving at, but it literally could be anybody and any position group overall. Let's talk about the emergence. We need someone to emerge in that Maryland wide receiver room as a wide receiver 3. I will talk about that after this ad from eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships, and is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. So our wide receiver room, it's in a pretty interesting spot right now, and I think there's a bunch of different guys that could step up / need to step up for Maryland football for us to take the step that I want our wide receiver room to be able to take, and the step that I think that it has the potential to take overall in that room. I think we have a bunch of different guys that are high-level football players that can do different things in that wide receiver room, but I also think there's some inexperience besides our top 2 guys that I'm pretty confident in overall, in Caden Prather and Ty Felton. I'm very confident in Caden Prather and Ty Felton as football players. I think they're really good. A lot of it's going to depend on who's throwing them the ball and if they're able to get them the ball. But Talia did an awesome job with those 2 guys getting the ball. Caden Prather had a great year last year with 42 receptions and 666 yards, 15.9 yards he averaged per catch and 5 touchdowns. A great red zone threat and a great player overall. And Ty Felton as well had a really big time year with 48 receptions, 723 yards, and averaging 15 yards per reception, 6 touchdowns. And so I'm looking at those 2 guys and I'm like, okay, those 2 guys are going to be elite. Those 2 guys are all Big Ten type of guys. Those 2 guys might be our best 2 players on offense. And they're going to operate the outside, and maybe Ty Felton will move inside and outside a little bit. He can definitely play both, I would say, but I think that's one of the things that I like about him. But I do really like those 2. But everybody knows that you got to have more than 2 guys on a wide receiver room, especially in college, in the current landscape of college football and being able to throw the ball all over the place and some of the spread offense and those type of things. You want different receivers that can make plays, and I think we have the guys who do it, but somebody has to emerge specifically as a third target. But I do want to start with this. I'm specifically talking about the receiver room. I do think the tight end room has great weapons that will be next in line. So I think it'll be those 2 guys, Caden and Ty. But then I think that Preston and Dylan Wade, I talked about Dylan Wade yesterday. Make sure you go check, or 2 days ago, make sure to go check that out. But Dylan Wade, I think, and Preston Howard are really going to be our third options. And then that third wide receiver is going to be more of our 4th, 5th type of options. But I do want to specifically talk about the receiver room, but I do think that the tight end room is a big part of that receiver room. But I did want to talk about the specifics in the receivers. And I'm looking at around, and I'm like, who emerges? My top guess is Octavian Smith. A spring game was weird for Octavian Smith. He played really well. He had a couple of deep shots where it was like, this guy, if you leave him with no safety over the top and you run him in man type of coverage, he's going to run by the DB and he's going to have a pretty good shot at getting behind that defense. And I love the guy that can stretch the defense like that on the receiver spot. And he might be our most explosive athlete in terms of speed, explosiveness, and all those different things. He might be our best athlete. People say that Ty Felton's the fastest on the team. I'm not sure it's not Octavian Smith. He is definitely a top-end athlete. And Octavian Smith has had a role on this offense for a little bit now. He's done some pretty solid things with the Maryland quarterbacks in the Maryland wide receiver room. He hasn't done anything crazy, but he's been definitely a pretty good player that has played a little bit. He's had in 2023 season 22 receptions for 209 yards and a touchdown. That's not bad for not being like a top 3-4 option. 22 reception, 209 yards. So he's played, and so I think he's a guy that needs to emerge, and I think he has a pretty good shot of emerging in that wide receiver room, and I think he's a good player that's going to have a chance to be able to play a lot in that wide receiver room for Maryland football. So I'm looking at Octavian Smith and his speed and that type of ability to operate maybe the inside a lot and then also be able to move outside. But it's not just going to be one guy. I do think he's kind of the receiver room. But wait, I almost forgot to talk about spring game. It was interesting because he did get behind the defense a couple times, but he was running with the second team offense, which I couldn't really understand what was going on with that because he's literally played with the first team. Like he's played a lot of minutes for Maryland football. So I couldn't really get why he was playing on the second team offense. I don't know, but he was in the spring game, and I don't know if he's like had a bad practice. I don't know, but he's a guy that to me is the leader to be a huge receiver next year in terms of guys that haven't made a huge production but have a chance to step up into a new role. I think he's got to be the first guy that I think can make a pretty big jump. And then Shalik Knotts is also interesting. I think he has a chance to emerge because of his frame and his ability at 6'4". He's such a big-bodied receiver, and he's just got length, and he's a good athlete that he's the type of guy that you don't want to mark up in one-on-one coverage. And Shalik Knotts, he's played a little bit too, not as much as Octavian Smith, but he's definitely had a couple of catches in his day, and he's looked pretty good doing it. And he's a guy that came in as a 4-star that needs to probably step up now that we're going to be looking at this year. He's 7 receptions for 55 yards in 2023, and so nothing crazy, but he definitely was involved a little bit. Like he got a reception here or there. He definitely played a little bit. And he's got to be next up. He's got to be a factor in that receiver room, and we're going to need him to play pretty well in there. And I think he's a guy that has the potential to step up. And then I also think Ryan Manning, who's a freshman last year, is a really good football player. I like Ryan Manning's game. Didn't play last year very much, but I think he has a chance to play and be a really good player. I think he's a good route runner. I think he can separate, and I think he's a guy that just gets open. And so I look at those guys. I think Robert Smith, he's a veteran presence. He's a redshirt junior that's been there for a while, but he never seems to be kind of a guy that they want to depend on or a guy that they want to play much. But I do like what he brings in terms of just being a guy that's been there for a while now and a guy that knows the offense, and he seems committed to Maryland football. Didn't leave to go somewhere else. And so Robert Smith's a veteran guy that I also like in that room. But we need somebody to emerge because defenses are going to be able to game plan for Ty Felton and Caden Prather. And when we play some really good DB units, we need multiple guys that can step up. And it's a lot harder to cover when we have multiple guys and different guys emerge. Whereas if it's just like Prather and Ty Felton, then the defense can focus on those two guys. So we need another guy to step up for Maryland football. I was about to say basketball because we are talking about basketball next, and Maryland's biggest recruitment on the board, their biggest recruit on the board. I will tell you about that after this ad from Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there is just so much good stuff in the game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash your buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own own unique mini games like digging for treasures or robot machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on the Google Play or the Apple Store. Game on. So Tyler Jackson, the 4/5 star, depending on where you look, is the top guy that Maryland basketball needs to land. It looks like, according to 247, Auburn and Maryland are very warm for Tyler Jackson. And Derek Queen did mention that this is a kid that he wants to add, and he should be the next kid to commit to Maryland basketball. So Tyler Jackson's interesting. He's a really good player. He's a really good athlete right now. He plays for Overtime Elite, is his kind of high school. And I don't know the ins and outs of Overtime Elite and that type of all that program and what goes into that league and all that type of stuff. I don't know if I know exactly enough to be able to really talk about it, but he is part of that Overtime Elite program. I know a lot of you guys know how that goes and kind of what that is. But he originally did go to St. Francis, and I saw him play in person, and I was like, who is this kid? And he was playing with Jonathan Lamoth, and he was also playing with Carlton Carrington. Of course, Jonathan Lamoth, you guys know, is the former Maryland player that has since transferred to North Carolina AT&T, and we thought Jonathan Lamoth was going to have a chance to be a good player for us, but it just didn't pan out. He just decided that he wasn't going to be probably in the rotation next year, and he needed to find somewhere else to play. And I thought that was fair. And then Carlton Carrington he's going to the NBA. I actually went to school with Carlton for 2 years before he transferred over to St. Francis. And so Tyler Jackson did play with those two guys at St. Francis, and I was there to kind of just check out Lamoth, see what Lamoth was about since he was a Maryland commit. And Lamoth looked good, don't get me wrong. And Carlton Carrington, he had a really great year this freshman year at Pitt and is now going to the NBA. But I was watching this Tyler Jackson kid and said, I'm not going to say he was maybe the best out of all three of them, but I was like, who is that guy? And someone was like, yeah, he's just a sophomore or whatever. And I was like, dang, like that kid can play. That kid's an elite type of player. And that was when Lamoth and Carlton were both seniors. And I'm watching this kid, and they're like, yeah, that kid's a sophomore. And I was like, that kid's the real deal. Obviously, different guys looked good on that court, and there's a lot of good players. But Tyler Jackson, his game is just think about like quickness and like a guy that is impossible to stay in front of. Like that's your type of guy. And Tyler Jackson, he's a guy that is impossible to stay in front of because of how quick he is, how good of an athlete he is, what he is overall as a player. He can shoot the ball. He can get to the rim, different finishes. He's obviously not this, but it's almost Kyrie Irving-esque. And you don't really want to compare someone to Kyrie Irving, but his skill set and his quickness and how he is as a player is kind of like Kyrie Irving. And so he does have a bunch of other offers, of course. About every offer that you can have, he has. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see. He has taken a visit to Auburn. He has taken a visit to Syracuse as well. And he's taken multiple visits to Auburn, actually, and Virginia Tech, LSU. He definitely has gone to different places, but he's going to be a guy that's going to be on top of our board that we want to continue to recruit at a high level. We want to continue to play at a high level. We want to continue to be in the right trajectory in terms of a basketball program. It doesn't stop. Even though I love using the portal, you still want to bring in new guys every year. And I like kind of how Kevin Miller did it this year. Bring in Derek Queen, a 5-star, and bring in Malachi Palmer, and then get the rest of your guys through the portal. And I'm looking at Tyler Jackson. He's a guy that we would definitely, if we were only bringing in 2-3 guys in a class, like he's definitely one of those guys that we would bring in. 247 has him ranked 34th in the class, 6-point guard right now, but I definitely think some other websites have him as a 5-star. So, like I said, Overtime Elite, transferred from St. Francis in Maryland, which is a basketball powerhouse. I got to see him live. He is the real deal. Definitely a guy that we potentially want to pick up. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked On Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked On Terps.